Hey guys, what is up? Lord Nick here, bringing you another episode of the Dangerous Game Podcast. This episode of the podcast, guys, is going to be about the suboptimal performance of the solo queue system. Now, this is not talking about why you are probably having issues with the system, but just overall what the system's problems are, and why it's damn near impossible for Riot to fix said problems. So, to get it all started off, guys, I want to talk about Riot's philosophy about solo queue. So, a couple of years back, Riot actually made a drastic change in their philosophy, because prior to this, they didn't really mess with solo queue much. Now, a lot of people would complain for a couple of seasons that solo queue was in a very bad spot, and really one of the few big changes they made to the actual system was moving over from the old ELO system, which was a really horrid system that they used to have, and they moved over to the LP current system where you have actual ladder climbs that show different divisions and such like that, and they kept your MMR, your matchmaking rank, kind of hidden. Now this was good for a short amount of time, up until Riot decided to switch out solo queue in general. You know, they changed the general philosophy of how the game itself is supposed to be. Now, League of Legends has always been a team game, but the whole premise about getting good at the game was all about a solo mentality. How good of a player are you? How good can you carry your team? Now, a couple of years back, Riot decided, you know what, we don't like that idea. We don't like the idea that solo queue is only good for those who are of absurdly high level. We want people who are good at teamwork to be able to climb. Now, they introduced flex queue, but for its first incarnation, flex queue just completely replaced solo and duo queue, which at its start everybody thought this was going to be a great idea. Now, mind you, every time Riot does something big like this that switches the system, everybody assumes it's going to be great right off the bat, and then it isn't, and everybody gets mad at Riot, blaming them like it's 100% their fault, even though a large part of it is the community asking for such changes, and they just don't pan out the way the community expects it, because the community is not looking in the broader ways of things. So, what were the problems with FlexQ? Now, one of the biggest problems with FlexQ was that if you, the solo individual who'd been soloing for the past couple of years, just go into FlexQ, you're not instantly going to have a group of guys that you're probably going to want to jump in with. Mind you, I have a lot of friends on League, but I did not have a group that was roughly in the same skill division as me that all wanted to group together. On top of that, fours never worked because that meant that you needed to have somebody that was playing solo, and there wasn't enough solo individuals for it to work properly. So the balancing of the ranks and stuff also for four people could grind much harder than five people, because with five people you compare them against other groups of five. With four people, they're usually getting groups of threes and twos, and maybe one solo individual versus them. Ooh, really sorry about those coughing, guys. Um, but it led to unbalanced matchmaking. And a big problem that FlexQ also faced was the fact that there's a lot of people that could cheese. You know, if your buddies got on a Smurf and came down to your level, they can much easier carry you now as long as you had a couple of your friends that would all listen to this one guy and have them hard carry you. So the hard carries could happen to people who were already innately much better at the game, and people who were kind of middle of the ground had a lot harder time actually climbing through it. There was a lot more team unity, but there was a lot more toxicity because those that weren't part of a group were much more toxic because they're just getting manhandled by groups of people that were just working together as a team when they were playing solo still because they don't have a lot of friends. So all in all, it made a lot of problems there. It also made a lot of problems because the individual wasn't being tested, the team was being tested, which doesn't always equate for the best level of play. Mind you, if we look back into season 1 and season 2 of League of Legends, a lot of random teams popped up for tournaments, and mind you, a lot of those teams won. But if you continued them into season 3, those guys were not nearly as good of players. A lot of those players moved on to analyst jobs and or just other positions where they became streamers and stuff because they themselves could not compete at that high of a level. And they knew that. But they are still known for competing at that high of a level, so they used that as a kind of publicity stunt to further their careers in other directions where they could succeed better. Now, mind you, if FlexQ kept the way that it was, we didn't have solo queue and stuff like that, League of Legends right now would probably look a lot different. On top of that, there would probably not be as big of a push towards their competitive scene, and there wouldn't be as much of a watch anymore, because the game itself would be completely different. But Riot decided, you know what, people are right, we don't need FlexQ, there's a lot of problems with the system. between just elo boosting and just straight up making it very difficult for people to actually individually play the game, we're going to go back to solo duo. But the problem with this is that Riot got a taste for the idea that we could make this a team-oriented game. And so for the next couple of years after that, every big sweeping changes Riot has made so that you have to work more as a team, which is good and bad. The good part of it is if you actually get members of your team that realize this is how the game should be played, and they pay attention of how do you win games, you could group together and you could actively win. The problem is that the solo queue mentality is get kills, win game. And if that is the case, you are not going to win your games as often. If you get more of these people, and you're going to get a lot of these people, from gold through frickin', from all the way down to bronze, all the way up to frickin' diamond, and you're going to find people that think the way you win the game is snowballing off of kills. And yes, this can help you, and snowballs have always been able to help you, but the biggest problem is that there's much more need to push for objective control. Dragons, Barons, Rift Herald are super important. Early tower plating, super important. Early towers in general, super important. Kills on the early side of things, yeah, they net you some gold and probably give you a little bit of an item advantage, but if you're not pushing for the objective gain from it, they don't do anything. And so, this big idea that Riot has changed this to more of an objective control game has been kind of blindly ignored by most of the people in solo queue. So, when you're looking at the old solo queue mentality, it was get kills, snowball, win game. Because you kill everybody, they're all dead, you push and you win. The problem is that has to get to late game. If other people are getting objective gold that's giving everybody on their team a crap ton more gold than your individual kill gives you, you're not going to solo carry. So, Riot's philosophy since then, this is the big thing, right? The problem is their philosophy. And it's gone that they wanted a team game, but they want it to appear as if there is still a need for solo strength. So they've done all these things saying this is going to increase the ability to solo carry, yada yada yada, and it doesn't. In all honesty, it has not done that job. A lot of the patches that they have done to increase solo strength, increasing shutdown gold, adding bounties and stuff like that, and adding the tower plates. Yes, you could solo carry if you can get these plates, but if you're against a duo and they realize you know what you're doing, you're going to get shut out because you're going to be put in 1v2 situations a lot of the time. And that does not always equate to you're going to be able to win. Cool, you're pulling pressure, but if the rest of your team does not know how to apply pressure, you're not going to win. The game itself has changed to the point of you need to have better game knowledge to succeed. So this goes back to, the old topic that I talked about before, micro and macro. What is more important? And right now, macro play is a definitely more important skill than being a micro godlike player. Think about it this way. Faker just lost at MSI to G2 Esports. G2 Esports has some amazing freaking players on that team, but how did they win? They won by just macroing the crap out of their opponents and then forcing. After they did this, early game they just play the macro game to the point that they get this massive lead, and then in the mid game they shift into just dominating them with their item advantage and their overall team fighting prowess and the ability to chase down and kill anybody in a 1v1 situation because they have such a high lead. So there's an important knowledge that people are missing currently in solo queue that Riot never did a good job of explaining. It is left again to the players to figure it out, and people haven't evolved to do it, which just leads to a problem that Riot has done is that they also keep saying, hey, we're adding in these things so you can solo carry. But what they didn't really make clear, unless you were constantly keeping up on patch notes and constantly paying attention to big changes Riot's making, which I do myself, but not everybody does. The onlookers who are still competitively are looking to be competitive in the past didn't have to actively look at these things. And now they do. You really have to be keeping up on it. You missed one patch and you're not going to understand the big changes Riot has made. And their philosophy has gone to this, is that it is their job to design solo queue to be teaching people to be team oriented, but still tell people that it's a solo queue. You get it? Like, it is for one person, but we want you to figure out how to work with random people on a team. So it's just kind of a screwed up mentality that Riot's in there. That they wanted to keep it back to that integrity of competitive integrity level that they had before with solo queue, but they've changed and adapted the game to where you have to function as a team or you will lose. There is it is much harder for one person to hard carry. A lot of pros and top players are even mentioning there's some guys that go down and they can do it. They're just really good at abusing certain champions that are really good at hard carrying, but that's because they're absurdly good at micro and their own macro mechanics to the point that, even with minor vision, they know how to outplay stupid people. Extremely good players are still struggling to go down and smurf at a much lower level because it's just really hard to do. You could check out, there's some couple of YouTube videos that I've seen recently and a couple of interviews with people where they'll talk about that. It's just really, the smurf environment is not as worth it below platinum for a lot of people now. And by platinum they mean like plat 1 and 2, where you're getting to the point where people are starting to actively understand how the game is supposed to be played. Um, but either way, we're going to the next topic on this part that kind of continues the suboptimal solo queue. And the big part of that is that Riot has become very active with their changes in the past couple of years. Before, a lot of their changes used to be just number tweaks and or just slight reworks here or there to champions to kind of adjust them and allow for new champions to come into play. And occasionally they'd overtune something and it'd be really broken for about a week or two, and then they change some few other things and it's fine. Right now, their biggest thing is they are constantly looking for what champions do we want to see in top echelon of play, which then, of course, tweaks it for the top echelon, which is how they should look at it. You should always look at the highest level of play and look to balance it first, because they're going to be the big determining factor of what everybody else is probably going to be playing. You could buff the crap out of Hecarim on patch notes, but bronze people aren't going to pick up on it unless the LCS is playing it. Right? There's just such a discrepancy in understanding of the game that you need to be balancing for the people that understand it the best. So that seems good, right? Like they're always balancing for that level, right? There's a problem to it as well, is right now is because they're so honed in on that, they're honed into what that top level is playing currently. So as they're putting in these smaller patches for other things that are known as like solo queue monsters and stuff like that, they're actively making things really powerful for top echelon, and it looks really powerful there, but then when you take it into solo queue, it's really weak. I.e., Akali, for instance. This champion is absurdly broken, but only in extremely restricted hands here, right? And that means that the champion's not overpowered per se, but it doesn't mean they're not broken. Universally saying overpowered and broken are the same thing just leads to more confusion, and I think I'll touch up on the difference between the two in a different video, but for now, just to understand it, something that is broken means that anybody can really grab it and play it with given the right environment of that thing. That thing is just stupidly strong, and you can just, it doesn't matter who you are, this thing is going to overpower people. And at Akali's highest point, that is exactly what she was. She was broken. What does overpowered mean? Overpowered means that they just have, just too much power to them, too much in their kit, too much overall damage, sustain, tankiness, and it's just really hard to deal with them. Well, something in her kit currently is overpowered, and that is her shroud. But what they're doing, overall, they keep tweaking other things because they want to keep the shroud unique to her, where she has this unique current thing that allows her to be invisible to everything. But that is just super broken. That's a mechanic that does not work. And Riot's logic is that they can't write more, fancy things. They're running out of ideas here. So this is the one thing that they have to keep for Akali to be unique. But it's stupid because why? Why does she have to have this? When you give people permanent, the ability to be invisible through everything, you end up with unfair and unbalanced gameplay. So why is it, that this is their idea of something they have to keep, and that's due to the fact that the idea of how they change things is different. They have to keep things unique. They have to keep things fresh. So this also leads back to their overactive changing in patches. They're constantly changing things to keep things fresh, make things and that's the big Riot philosophy as well for design right now, is you have to keep it new, you have to keep it fresh, you have to keep people wanting to come back to try out something different, but they're not trying to retain the old identity that made them super popular. You get it? Like, when you're actively changing this much, you lose a lot of your old fan base. And, people will start saying it's because the old fan base is looking in rose-tinted goggles. And it's because they fell in love with one aspect of the game that no longer exists, right? Like old solo queue, for instance. Seasons 3 and 4, as much as I disliked them, probably had some of the best solo queue out there previously. Just because the system itself was in a much better spot, the player base was growing, people were starting to understand the game better, and the champion pool was getting bigger. And so there was constantly new things coming out with the champion pool, but you could always just, find your niche and kind of climb yourself, and if you were good enough, you would climb. And that was a really good way and a good feel for the game. But the problem is that about season 5 area is where Riot kind of shifts, and I think it was because they got bigger as a company, they hired more people, they changed out a lot of the people who helped with the original design of the game, so the game itself took on a new identity, which it just, over time everything starts taking on its new identity. If you look at football nowadays to football back in the 1940s, it's a completely different game, right? Like the padding, the overall scores, back in the day you used to be able to do a thing called a drop kick. And a drop kick was where you punted the ball trying to get it through the goalpost and it's worth 1 point. Drop kicks are no longer a thing in football. You would never see that nowadays, but back in the 40s and 50s and stuff, that's where people would win games. It's off of a drop kick every now and then. Like you could, it's tied up. It's 10 seconds left. They get it to the 50-yard line. Let's see if their punter is good enough to get a drop kick. Like that's something that actually happened, but you don't see that nowadays. And vice versa. If you switched a fan from back then to looking now, the game is completely different. They may not like it as much as they liked it back when they were younger. And that's how games evolve. And that's something we do have to understand that will happen with the game. But right now, Riot is going through a phase where they think they have to change the game entirely. They think they're keeping it the same. But in all in all honesty, they are changing it so vastly that it's making it even hard for the pros to keep up with stuff. For instance, Korea is no longer dominant. Like we've seen the past year and a half now, Korea is struggling to keep up with these metagame changes. Why? Because it's shifting faster than it ever has, and it's changed from being completely macro oriented to being macro micro mix. So before, where they could do a slow pace, we are micro wise we are stronger than you, and so we're going to use that to be able to make up for the fact that our macro game is also better, but it's slower. But now you have to have a fast early game into a slow mid game into a hyperactive late game. It's so wonky with how the game is played, and it's cool. I mean, I give you that. It's definitely a cool feel, but it makes the game. It is a different game. It makes the game a different game. It's like League of Legends 2.0. It's no longer the exact same game that we used to fall in love with. It is a different game now. So we've also covered in that talk a little bit about balance for high level. That was kind of just a short little snippet there. I think really is that they have to balance to the highest level of the game because they are going to be the guys that will determine the game. So if they balanced for low elo, for instance, they would not be doing really well because if you balance for low elo, you got to make things overpowered because they don't understand how the game works. So that would then make it even more overpowered for the top elo, and so we'd see champions with like 90% win rates, and that should never happen. So they always have to balance for high. That was just something I want to give a quick explanation to. I might talk about it in a later video if you guys are more interested in that topic specifically as to why that has to happen. And then the last big thing as to why solo queue is so suboptimal, and Riot's probably never going to learn to balance it, is just the skill discrepancy. They don't know how to handle it. You have a large portion of your fan base is in silver, and silver means that they have a very poor knowledge of how the game should be played in an optimal sense. So when you have a massive amount of your fan base is in silver, and they want to make it to gold, Riot has to figure out ways to kind of incentivize people to get to gold. But if too many people get to gold, what's the point of getting to gold if everybody's there? You get me? Like, understanding how to increase the ability for people to get to gold while without, watering down the rank system to the point that there's no point to it is extremely hard for them. And right now they're walking a very thin line, and they're very close to the point that gold means nothing. Like, the amount of people in gold has gone up each year for the past couple of years now. And it's not even that the base is getting better. Most of those people are playing roughly the same as they've always played. The problem is that Riot is making it slightly simpler for these guys to accidentally get there. Mind you, when I was placed in lower gold at the beginning of the season for one of my ranks, in my provisionals, I got placed in lower gold. I got through my provisionals, finished them up, and I got into mid gold. I was winning 25 to 30 points a game. I got into plat off of like a 17 game win streak. As soon as I got into plat, I was winning about 15 points of LP per win. I didn't have a massive loss streak yet. I hadn't found a place where I couldn't gain. I didn't gain any MMR or anything, but the system itself just slowed me down. And the biggest reason is it just feels like Riot is trying to make it easier to get out of silver and into gold, and even out of gold into plat. And then after that, it requires you such a high level of consistent play that grinding is just not easy. It's not there. Like, you have to put in so many hours and so much time to make sure you maintain that level of skill to be able to climb it, that even just from plat higher, it becomes so much harder to do these things. And then just with all the other changes they've made, it's made it much more difficult. And I feel like this is a big topic overall, right? And I feel like I've ranted on this one probably long enough for you guys this week. But if you take anything away from this, don't blame Riot for their problems with solo queue. Yes, a lot of it is stemmed from Riot's stupid philosophy that because this is a team game, we have to orient this so that you have to play more as a unified team. But we want to keep it so that it's a solo queue environment, which just doesn't work. They're two antitheses to each other. That yes, it's a team game, but you should leave enough room that a solo skilled individual should be able to hard carry the game without having to have the absurdly high level that they're making that floor for that carry potential at. So, but on top of that, they can't balance it so that it becomes easier as much, because then you have too many people getting to the higher elos, and it waters down the competitive integrity and waters down the meaning of getting higher elo in general. So when you're looking at it, how do what is the best way about honoring or figuring out how the solo queue, if the solo queue is suboptimal or not? Well, the biggest thing I could say is just kind of avoid it. As much as this is trying to help you understand why it's suboptimal, you need to kind of just also get through the idea that, yeah, while it's suboptimal, it's still optimized enough that you could do the things to carry yourself. You yourself just have to take a lot more, it just takes a lot more from you to make up for the suboptimal system. So, really, I guess the lesson from this video is get good scrub, but, really just kind of, if you want to learn how to abuse the current system of it, watch a lot more LCS games, learn how to practice your micro and macro better, which I might do in the next video, and talking about how to do such things. And then possibly find yourself a duo queue partner, because the more people, yes, initially it's going to be harder, but the more synergy you build up with that person, the easier the game is going to get, because you have a teammate. And that's kind of how you have to play now, is with a teammate. Well, at least that's how I see it. Anyhow, guys, I know I kind of got on a couple of tangents there, but I hope you found this video as informative as some of my last ones, or maybe as entertaining at least. Thank you guys, as always, so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't. Follow me on Twitch, because I will be streaming a bit more often now. Feel free to follow me on Facebook and Twitter as well. All the links as always, are down below. And thank you guys again for watching, and I hope you all have yourself a wonderful, wonderful day.